Welcome to The One Inside, an internal family systems podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Sallenberger. On today's podcast, I chat with Loch Kelly about accessing self. Hey everyone. I had a lovely week break, and I was really excited to revisit this episode with Loch on self. If you follow me on social media, I've been saying that I feel very blended with so many parts lately. And wow, it was just so good to listen to this episode. It feels like one that I will listen to again and again. Loch Kelly is an IFS trained psychotherapist. He is a well-known meditation and awakening leader. He's author of 2 incredible books, and he's just an all-around super amazing, warm, and friendly person. I really liked this talk with Loch, and I say over and over and over, "Oh, I love that." And I actually had to edit out a couple of he would say something and I'd say, "Oh, I love that." And yeah, so now that I'm pointing it out, you'll probably notice it. But I took a couple of them out because I was like, oh my gosh, a part of me was rolling my eyes like, stop saying that. This episode really just teaches us to connect to self in so many different ways. And so he teaches us to ask who is aware and who is the one asking. He explains and leads us through a meditation around what is here when there's no problem to solve. And what I did is I copied out his explanation and then how he just organically walks us through a meditation. And I copied that out and created a separate podcast with just that. I think it's about 7 minutes long. So it's in this episode, but if you want to just listen to that over and over and over again, it has its own episode. And then we talk about 3 common self-like parts. And Loch does a great job of not letting me get him very distracted, as I like to do. And Loch has so many amazing things to offer. So check out his website at lochkelly.org. And then, of course, I would love to hear from you at the One Inside Facebook page and on IFS Tammy on Instagram and Twitter. And so I don't know if you saw or not, or if you're on Clubhouse or even know what that is. I didn't. So 2 past guests, and one of those past guests is going to be on next week. They were on Clubhouse talking about IFS. They got a room. I think that's what they got a room. That sounds so weird, but they had a room and had a conversation about IFS. And so I have another friend, an IFS friend, who wants to do that with me, to do some rooms on Clubhouse talking about IFS. So her and I are talking this week about maybe, finding some time to put that out there. So if you're on Clubhouse, friend me or however you do that. And hopefully we'll get something fun started, just some fun conversation on Clubhouse about IFS. So, and if you know what I'm talking about and know more about that, then definitely send me a message. And let's get something going. That sounds super fun. So parts of me that just get so excited about just connecting with you, I'm just asking them to settle a second. Just to leave you with my hope for you is that you will continue to access that self, that true essence that's inside of you, and experience that, and that your parts will experience that no matter what's happening in your life, no matter the trailheads and the triggers and the hard stuff and the hard season that you might be in, remembering that you have a self, that you are a self. It's who you naturally are. And Loch does an amazing job of teaching us and leading us, and I just feel so grateful for him. Enjoy. Hi.
Hey, Tammy.
How are you?
Good. I'm great. Thanks.
Good.
So nice to be here with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you could do it. How long have your meditations been on Insight Timer? That's so exciting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They've been on a long time. On maybe 5-7 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Since the beginning.
I didn't even know it's been around that long.
Yeah. They contacted me as soon as they started.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that because so there's meditations for sleep. So there's all the different types of meditations, but there's also your teaching is on there too. Like what a gift that is.
Yes. Yeah. And so, that's kind of how I feel like as much as I can, I'm really kind of an open source, giving things away, trying to share it and get some of this out to anybody who's interested.
That's great. Yeah. And we can do that now. And like with the pandemic, people are more looking for that stuff. So even though that's been there 5 to 7 years,
Yeah.
like it's people are needing it and wanting it more. So
That's right. Yeah. And so I tried to use a lot of different platforms. I had a lot of fun with YouTube's this year. I did like a music video one. I did a 8D surround sound.
I didn't know that. Okay, I'm gonna check
Yeah.
that out. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, trying to get to different people who have different learning styles.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that. Um, Yeah, I'm gonna check that out. So I met you actually. So I found my book that I had
Mhm.
from you that I wrote. Like I said, my manager loved it and
Ah,
wrote a lot of notes in it. I read it in 2018, and then
yeah.
it looks like one of my managers was really smart. And I went to one of your workshops you did in Boston, and I
Yeah.
wrote notes in the back of the book.
That's
I was
it.
like, oh, that was really smart. So I didn't remember doing that.
Yeah.
So I remember you did two workshops. One was for IFS therapists,
Yeah.
and one I think was just open for the public.
That's right. Yes.
Um,
Yeah. So, I'm kind of try to bringing these few different worlds together of very particular kind of meditation, kind of more awakening style meditation, wisdom traditions, and psychotherapy and neuroscience. People start from different languages, but I feel like I can get them to appreciate the different interconnections of these different dimensions of our body, being, and consciousness.
I love that. And I love saying that too, right? There's sort of these different like models, but
Mm-hmm.
there's all these interconnections of
Yes.
them. I
Yeah.
love that. How were you introduced to IFS and Dick?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know you and Dick
Yeah.
around that time, you and Dick were doing a lot of like workshops
Yeah.
together. So I'm
That's
curious
right.
about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had, gone to graduate school in psychology and spirituality, gone off to Sri Lanka, India, and Nepal, studied a lot of these direct path awakening traditions, came back. And while I was there, I had some profound experiences. But what it led me to do is kind of open my heart and feel like, no, I'm not going to stay here in a monastery or a cave. I want to go back to New York City and serve people. So I came back at a time when I started some soup kitchens and shelters, and then ended up doing a joint degree in with Columbia School of Social Work, and this other degree I was doing at Union Theological and Columbia School of Comparative Spirituality. And so I had done a lot of parts-based therapies, and I was working in a clinic, and studied Gestalt and psychosynthesis and voice dialogue and uh, John Bradshaw, a lot of inner child. And so I had my own version of this. And about 10 years ago now, I guess, my wife, Paige, who is also an IFS therapist and has done some PA work, um, went to a weekend workshop with Dick because she had heard some good things. And she came back and said, hey, this guy does the same thing as you, except upside down. And so what she meant by that was he starts with parts and gets to self. And I start with making sure people get self before they can work with parts. So then I went and did a day long with him when he came to New York, and went up and introduced myself, and he invited me to teach at the conference that was coming up. And then I did a workshop at the IFS conference in Providence, Rhode Island, a bunch of years ago. And he kind of walked in the back as I started, sat in the last row, kind of started in the peanut gallery, and then
Did you
started to
see him there? Did you
yeah,
notice him? Oh my
yeah.
gosh. Okay.
so so it was kind of funny. It was kind of like, okay, here we go. And then I just kind of launched into what I was doing, and his eyes got big, and then he started hearing people kind of what I call popcorn, which is people start to recognize their self and realize that they're immediately moving from self essence to self energy to self leadership, and they're speaking from self, about self, and parts. And so, yeah, it was amazing, kind of fun workshop. And then he said, "Let's go to lunch." And then he said, um, he said, let's start working together. And
That's
so, kind of
awesome.
was immediate connection, recognition, and collaboration.
I love it.
Yeah.
Um, do you do you guys have a different idea? So his idea is that we have to go through these parts to get
Mm.
self, or
Yeah.
sort of to go through all this protective system, and then
Mhm.
self will emerge.
Right.
But you're upside down, or you're
Hmm.
you're you're doing it a different way. So did you guys talk about that, like about sort of how your approaches were different in that way?
Sure. Yeah. And we played with both ways. In some ways, the place where we actually meet, I mean, theoretically, he said it says it's like a subtraction method or
Yeah.
um,
Constraint release model.
constraint
Yeah.
release model. But if you really follow it, which I did, I was like, okay, but you're saying, okay, are you aware of that part? Can you ask that part to give you some space? How do you feel toward that part? You know, so now you've just actually started from the part, but you immediately are assuming you're, if you're saying, how do you feel toward that part, you're in self in order to begin to do the 5 F's of finding, focusing, fleshing out, befriending from where. So that's what I kept, that's where we kept going. Like, okay, so are we doing that from a self-like part? Is that
Ooh.
okay? Is that like, if you are, that's fine. But could it be that you just do the same? So what I did and my kind of working with the same model is to to do it classically as Dick does, but then also maybe once people get comfortable to start using the 5 F's towards self. Can you
Ooh,
soon?
okay. Tell me what you mean.
So, so, um, so, so know thyself is really the central question from East and West about who am I, and and certainly when you read Dick's books, he talks about East and West wisdom traditions, and so my experience is that you can know self just as easy as you can know parts. However, it's subtler and not well, you know, uh, defined, particularly in the West, because we tend to be parts based from the beginning. So we don't even have a sense that there is something greater than ourselves, and that is one of the moves that is so important both in IFS. Can you be aware of that part? What? I thought I was that part. Aren't I the one who's listening and thinking and trying to do good things? Right? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that move in IFS is similar to what I call the mindful move, which is, can you be aware of your thoughts, feelings, and sensations that are coming and going? So you move from a small self or a manager or an ego center or being identified or blended with this feeling of I think, therefore I am. And then you step out. And so the question is what steps out? Where do you step out to? Do you step out to a new self-like part, which is fine? Or can you keep going to find what I call self-essence, which is more invisible, is actually starts with the space. so so I call it spacious awareness or spacious awake awareness. So can you, when you're blended, you say, can you ask that part for some space? And then you are aware of the part, and now just be aware of where you're aware from. Are you aware from another part, a manager part, a smart therapist part, a mindful witness, a kind of empathetic, energetic part? Then notice that, and then ask that part for some space. And then the feeling of self essence is that it's invisible and intelligent, interconnected, but it doesn't have a location like a part. So when you find it, you find it's boundless and inherent. Mm. So that feeling is odd to consciously be aware of, but most people have felt it when they're doing the things they love, like gardening, sports, walking in nature. You just get a feeling that you're more spacious and you're aware from this more interconnected, spacious consciousness rather than a small part or just a body.
One of the things that you talk about, this sort of like the awake awareness, mm-hmm. and that idea of like who's aware.
Yes.
So one of the quotes that I loved was, what are we looking for? What we are looking for is what is looking.
Yes.
Or like, what are we looking for is maybe who is looking.
Yes, that's right. And you know, that's interestingly, who is that quote from? It's not from some Eastern guru. It's from Saint Francis of Assisi.
Yeah, I love that.
So it's a Western tradition, but these are the wisdom, the same things, and it's this little leap that it immediately like made me feel so at home with IFS. Is, oh, self is the central, most important dimension of IFS and what distinguishes it from other parts-based systems, which there are many. And so that, like, okay, so let's get to know that, like what, how can we do the same elegant kind of differentiation and feeling and knowing that we do toward parts, finding, focusing, fleshing out, befriending, facilitating self to part at the end, but doing it towards self. The thing I added or as complementary is this, keeping the self leadership 5 and the 8 dimensions of self energy, but then adding self essence as a primary dimension of this. What's called emptiness awake, emptiness that's interconnected with appearance. In Buddhism, they talk about the three bodies. Dharmakaya is the body of pure awareness, and then Sambhogakaya is energy, and then Nirmanakaya is physical, human, relative level self-leadership. So it's similar, but I'm just emphasizing that when you discover self-essence as the ground, the boundless ground, and then it appears as energy, and then it's interconnected in all parts, then the love and unconditional love and interconnectedness changes everything.
Yeah. Do you want to say more about that?
Yeah. I mean, this is the, so I guess the first thing I'll say is that it, when it's described, it can sound, difficult or esoteric but literally there are experiential ways that are very similar to the ways that you learn about unblending and being aware of parts, that you just turn that same spacious awake awareness toward itself to make sure that you feel, and it's a direct experience. Um, it's a beingness. It's just a dropping an isness that doesn't orient to thought or to a part in order to include everything. And when you find that, that's really its qualities are, I'll say what the 11 eyes of self-essence are.
Ooh, I
It's
like it.
it's invisible, right? So there's where the space starts. So are you aware of being blended with a part? Yes. Can you ask that part for some space? Okay. So now you're starting to know self as space. Now, is that space the space in the room, or could it be awake space
What's
as the as
what's
self-essence? Yeah.
yeah, what would the difference be?
So space would be an object. So if you're just aware of the space in the room, um, or aware from a part that has space in between you as the smart therapist part that now is unblended and feels, oh, there's space between me, the new me, and who I thought was me, that part. That's kind of that's a physical space.
Yeah,
Or
what I was thinking of is actually when I'm thinking of like, okay, can I ask that part to give me space?
yeah,
I'm not focusing on the space. I'm focusing on the distance between
yes,
me and the part.
that's right. And that's the first, in both mindfulness and meditation, and that is the first space. So
Okay.
it is distance. But then the next question is location. So we'll go to the part. Where is the part located, right? So
Yeah.
this is an important question. So now all I'm saying is, okay, good. Now you got it located. Yeah, it's kind of in my throat. It's, oh no, it's between my ears, behind my eyes, looking out. Okay. And it's about this size and it feels like it's got these qualities and this energy or this color. Okay. So if you just, you definitely may have to work with some of your uh, protective parts that say, don't space out and don't become dissociated or depersonalized. But actually, the awake space is comforting, intelligent. Um, so if you then locate with this premise that the wise gals and the wise guys have described it as spacious, boundless, both spacious and pervasive, subtle, intelligent, innate, indestructible, illuminated, has a kind of a quality of light, a clear light.
Mm.
It's kind of intimate and immutable, but and infinite, and it just is. So those, if you can feel, and awareness starts to know itself as self-essence, as free of no longer being a part-based self. And that's, so first you're not that one part, then you're aware of that part with some distance, and then you keep looking back through the mindful witness to see what's aware of that, and you'll eventually open up into this subtle, spacious, pervasive, interconnected space, silence, stillness. And then it kind of goes into this unity, interconnectedness, which starts moving towards self energy. So that which initially took me like a 10-day retreat to find, I was able to say, okay, what? Now, wait a minute. If the premise is that's already here within us, inherent, it's not developed or created, how can I find it? And the key is that it can only find itself. So this awareness once you get a feel for the space, which is a great first move, space as distance, then space as knowing space that knows itself as boundless, spacious, and pervasive. Now you feel that you're connected to something greater than yourself, and you're kind of unplugging from parts-based conditioning into this kind of field of supportive, rather than being spaced out, you'll feel, if you feel it, you'll feel like, oh, I just am connected to this effortless awareness that's always been aware and here and is essentially who I am.
Right. It's this sort of tricky, maybe not tricky, maybe trippy. Maybe it's trippy, this idea of like the awareness. You use the word awareness like a zillion times.
Yes.
And so the idea of like, who is aware? Like if I'm being aware of sort of, I'm sitting on the chair right now and I'm looking out the window, who is it that's aware?
Right.
And then that I think is what maybe begins to create the space.
Yeah, and it is the middle section can be a little trippy, and you don't want to get caught in the trippy because but that is why people who do psilocybin and MDA with PTSD, they describe the parts, they describe the trippy in betweenness, but then they describe this self essence, which is not trippy.
Yeah.
That first. If I say sometimes you have this parts-based orientation, then there's like a little disorientation and then a reorientation.
Yes, that makes so much sense to me, right? So if I'm sitting here trying to unblend and being like, okay, the part of me that's thinking, and then that feels really sort of normal and like you're saying, parts-based.
Yep.
And then there's this sort of trippy, disillusioned as am I using this word right? Unhooking?
Yeah.
I want to talk about the unblending. So is unhooking and unblending the same thing?
Yeah. So unblending. So it's the unhooking gives a little more like a handoff of the baton. You can kind of ask the part to unblend, but now who's aware, who's intentionally opening is the awake space. So it's unhooked. So it's moving and knowing. So the part is no longer in charge. Yeah. Once it kind of gives over the baton of power, of location, and yeah.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah. And it can't make sense until you experience it, and that's that's the key.
Yeah, totally agree. I totally agree. Mm-hmm. And that's that feeling of like, right, that idea of like, okay, parts driven and then unhook, unblend, which can feel trippy. But then once I'm in that space, right, once I'm in that self energy, that self essence, once I'm aware that I am the one that's aware.
Yes.
Am I saying that right? Then that actually is there's clarity, that there's clarity and centeredness and connected and grounded and all those things.
That's right. So it is almost like this. You have to be willing to open up into the boundless. And then what I know that other people use the word U-turn to kind of as a U-turn to be focused on other people. And then you take the U-turn to realize you're the one who you have to deal with your parts. But right. I use it as you open to this spacious awareness that's boundless and greater than you. And then you realize the realization is, I am the awareness that's already aware is essentially who I am and where I've always been aware from. So now I'm aware from there. And then you are kind of come back in a U-turn from opening up to this spacious beyond the part and beyond the self-like part of the mindful witness until you then find this boundless ground that's equally inside and out already. And then as that awareness arises as vibration energy, now you're in self energy. So it's not two, there's not a second thing that you're aware. So you're not aware from a witness, which a lot of people get caught in, that self is a witness. It actually is an interconnected field that is um, at its ground is invisible and subtle and can be felt as such, and then it arises as dancing aliveness and then forms
Mm.
into thoughts, feelings, and parts,
Mm.
um, which then has self energy within everything. So everything has self energy, but it's not a matter of, oh, just be aware from a part that has more or less self energy. You can do that, but when you really discover being aware from self leadership, it's not that anymore. Then you really have a team of parts that
Mm.
are on board for functioning from self leadership, which
I love
is
that.
yeah,
Yeah, I was imagining sort of a family dancing, right? This sort
yeah,
of this family is now dancing, and the mindful witness, yeah,
yeah.
because that's probably where a lot of us, me
Yes,
included, probably stop because that feels
that's right.
so good.
Yes. So I here's the so the fun thing about this whole thing is that like it's ever expanding, and I'm like I love the IFS and the community and the everything that's going on and in with people who are interested in awakening and what is this and what's that and how do you heal. And so I'm developing simple new ways to help people get this. So one of the things I realized that I'm working with now is it seems to be there's three self-like parts that people who I've worked with in IFS as therapists get caught in. One is the mindful witness. So you unblend from, let's say you start with a manager part, because I often find that's one of the easiest ways to teach self. So start with the most self-like part, which is the one who's trying to understand what is self, right?
Mm,
So there you go. So now let's do it as like if
that's
somebody
good.
comes into your office and says, "Well, I don't have a lot up today." Okay, good. Let's get to know self. Start with the one who's trying to understand. So if there isn't a crisis or a ongoing, trauma part or exiles that are coming up, you can teach and show and experience. So you start with that thinker, doer, ego center, manager, and then you open, ask that part for some space. And now, if you're in a detached witness that has some acceptance and kind of observing intelligence, but it's detached witness, that's the mindful meditator or mindful witness. The second one is that people tend to get caught in is the smart, empathetic uh, therapist, trained therapist part. So there you unblend, and now you're in this. Oh yes, I'm aware of that. It's a part, but it's been trained to be empathetic, or they.
Yeah,
It's called
right.
compassionate, but it's kind of not compassionate with a big C. It's
Yeah.
like yes, I feel. Oh, I have like puppies and my inner parts,
Yeah.
which is normal human part capacities, and they're good. All of these are good. Like
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
thing. It's like,
Yeah.
and all these you can do IFS therapy from a self-like part or not know self like most uh, parts-based systems and get a lot of healing. But
Yeah.
the but let's go a little bit further because when you discover self and ourself and self befriends parts and listens to parts and loves parts, oh my god, it's like it's a party.
Mm.
It's like, oh my god, finally there's warm
Mm.
loving presence here and everything's okay, even though one of the parts is like, yeah, but I'm gonna take about a year to tell you about all the things I need to tell you about. And I'm like, okay, I'm here, go
Yeah.
ahead,
Yeah.
right?
I love that. I actually have a part that is very nurturing
Yeah.
and very maternal.
Mm-hmm.
And I often think that that's self. And
Right.
I actually think that I had a trainer actually asked me, I think,
Mm-hmm.
if it felt like a mothering part. And I was
Mm,
like, oh, because that feels so much like self to me to have this
right.
nurturing and I'm there and I'm like
Mm-hmm.
loving on these little parts of me, but it's
Yeah.
more maternal,
Yeah. And
and
it has a lot
and
of
I don't know
self
that I would have known that. Yeah, yeah.
it has a lot of self in it, but it's just being willing to consider could there be even a more amazing mother, like the mother of the universe, that is loving that mother who loves the, you know,
I
and,
love that. Yeah.
yeah,
That's beautiful.
yeah.
That's
And when you,
beautiful.
yeah, discovering that, that's the, what people then start feeling like is spiritual or religious, but ultimately it can all be described as consciousness, and then people can have their own unique spiritualities or religion or no spirituality, and it all works either
Yeah,
way.
which I
That's
really
the amazing
appreciate.
thing, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. One of my favorite things that actually one of the glimpses, which
Mm,
I want you to talk about what that is, but one of the
okay.
glimpses you had in the book that I really loved, and then I was super excited to see that you had it on the Insight Timer,
Yeah.
was the question, what is here when there's no problem to solve?
Yes.
Can you talk about what that means?
Yes. So this is a little quick. So when I learned some of these Tibetan style and Mahamudra, which is like a North Indian style pointers, they would try to point out the premise is yourself or true nature or heart mind or nature of mind, all those things meaning the same thing that we're calling self in IFS, is already here. It doesn't need to be created or developed. It's actually just hidden. Our consciousness is blended with parts and with our body and instincts and conditioning. And all we have to do is shift our awareness, foreground, background. So that's the, Gestalt thing, right? The foreground, background. And to that, instead of focusing on the content, you shift to the context. So I played with little ways to show people how close it is, how immediate it is, and let them not give them any philosophy ahead of time or any imagination. And so I came up with this is one of them. So what it is it's recognizing that the manager um, parts are constantly trying to help by solving the problems. What's going on in the world? What's going on inside of me? Is this okay? Is this safe? What should I do next? What's the, so whether it's one manager or the multiple manager parts within that committee, um, they're all trying to help, and they're all little anxious or depressed, or they're in polarizations about you should do that. No, don't do that. You should relax now. I already relaxed already. Either way, they're trying to right solve the
Yes.
problem of being relaxed, or trying to solve the problem of getting the
Yes.
job,
I'm
something
trying to
done.
relax. Shut up.
What do you mean? so so if you just so this little simple, and everyone can just try this just now. So the only premise is that the self essence, the self energy, and the self leadership are already here when the part unblends or lets go or relaxes. That what's left then in that moment could be you getting a direct experience of self when parts relax. So the simple inquiry you can do with your eyes open, just in a normal sense of letting your awareness kind of open and drop and feel, is to ask yourself this inquiry: what's here now when there's no problem to solve? So just noticing, understanding the question and the problem solver that's even trying to solve that, and then let that relax. Thank it for its hard work. And then what's here? Where are you aware from when there's no problem to solve just now? And then feel that. Is there a boundary, color, shape, limit to where you're aware from? And then what's it like to be aware from there as this? And then as this, what's the felt sense connection to your body parts any the world in the room. Yeah, getting a feel for this invisible, intelligent, spacious, pervasive, awareness-based rather than thought-based, yet alert, and then interconnected, and then feeling there's kind of an okayness or a natural safety when you don't go to thought to create a part-based manager. You don't go to sleep to rest. And there's just this natural sense of self-essence, then self-energy. And then from here, you could speak or move, and that's kind of like people being in the zone when you are in a flow consciousness. This is what you feel like from within. And then from here, see, now, is there a part? Well, from here, is there a part that would like your attention, that is curious about you, is curious what's going on, wants to kind of get a rise to befriend or to be included in this sense of presence? And then can you kind of notice even prior to compassion, there's kind of unconditional love, which is just, there's no conditions. No parts need to be any different way. Pleasant and unpleasant feelings can arise within this. So that's the key, is not to contract around unpleasant, but feel this greater capacity of self-essence, that while there's pleasant and pleasant in content, self-essence feels no pain, is never sleepy, is always just is, and it's with and arising as relative thoughts, feelings, parts that have pleasant and unpleasant experience and can bear what seems to be unbearable because it's so vast and loving and pervasive.
I love that for so many reasons, but one is you just did what you described your wife said.
Mm-hmm.
You open up the space and here's self, and we're feeling all this self, and then you invite parts to come back in, and how that would feel. And that feels, as I was doing it with you, like that feels so different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's ultimately the same, because you know, no matter what you're doing, from befriending to being curious to unburdening, if you're in self, if you are, and I do, in some ways, parts are more or less in self, but being self-led is either self-led or not self-led. There is, that's been a debate. Like, it's not an either or, it's always degrees. And it's like, well, self-led or part-led, you gotta have a part with a lot of self that's leading. Okay, that's good. But when you feel what self-led is, it's like a whole different universe. And then parts help. Parts are functional. Self isn't so good at a lot of things, in its essence, right?
Right. But those parts are unburdened, right? The parts that are function are not burdened. That's, a lot of people ask about that, actually.
Yeah.
And actually, I think I was supposed to ask you that, now that I'm thinking about it. Someone asked me that they had asked a bunch of trainers about whether they could be self-like, or degrees of that. And are you self-led or not self-led? And I was thinking, I'm going to ask Locke that, but you just answered it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the feeling, because you just feel it. You can just feel parts led. I can feel like that mother part feels like it's got a lot of self energy, but then when you feel, is there a kind of a spacious, boundless mother that's aware of that mother, that's inherent within that mother toward the part, then it's like, oh my God, right? You just feel like
Right. I love
that is
that.
not a degree. That just is a
Mm,
flip of a parts based or self. That's my experience. So
yeah.
people
Self-led or
have different,
parts-led.
yeah, people have different experiences, and but let me say the third one that people get caught in, just so, and then we
Yeah.
can jump to whatever. So the when you unblend from, let's say, a manager part or any part, and you're aware, and the question is, are you aware of that part, where its location, shape, size, color? How do you feel toward that part? Then you, for me, I assume the person is in a self-like part, even if they have quality. So usually it's a mindful witness, which is a little detached, or a smart, empathetic therapist part. Or the third one is an empathetic, energetic uh, part, which has a little more energy. It's called subtle body energy. So people who are empaths or have like psychic abilities, or are more energy centered, call that self energy, but they're actually in subtle body energy. So they'll say like, oh, I feel very, very connected, and we're like, the energy, I can feel the energy and everything in the room. And when somebody walks in, like highly sensitive people,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. 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 Right. Right. Right.
so they feel connected. If somebody, a highly sensitive person, will feel
Right.
that way, that's just their makeup, energetically, subtle body, inner
Yeah.
body. So somebody walks into a room, they can tell whether someone's upset or not.
Right.
Many of us can to some degree, but so that's called self energy. Sometimes is that merge. It's kind of a different. It's unblended because there's two, but it's not really interconnected and um, pervasive. It's still a separate energy parts.
Yeah. That actually makes a lot of sense. And what would be scary about that then is it's really dependent on the room, right? It's not really
Right.
it's yeah.
The environment, yeah,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
the person, yeah, you're working with. And some
Right.
people, this is the whole study with Tanya Singer, empathy versus compassion, where if many therapists are empathetic, and if you're very much empathetic in this way, you're taking on people's energy, um, and you go to burnout. So empathy
Yeah.
goes to empathetic burnout. And her study shows there's this other thing called compassion that isn't burnout. And I feel like that compassion isn't just the compassion of the smart therapist, but it is this other unconditional love that then
Mm.
has compassion that is not as if the energy from the other person goes right through you. It doesn't stick in your body or in your part. It goes, you can feel it because you're connected to your client, but you're not taking it on. You're trusting they have the self and you have a self, and
Mm.
it's in between are these parts that have energy, but you're not um, stuck in the energetic, subtle energy.
Yeah, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that, like, with some of the other things you're saying, is feeling and experiencing that is the only way you are to know the difference, right? Well, what does that
Absolutely.
feel like? And that's going to feel differently.
Yeah. And just having these little, that's what I'm trying to follow Dick's model of these elegant, simple, like 5 F's. Here's the 3 places you can get caught. And just check that
Right.
out. So if you unblend and assume you're in a self-like part, now be aware, can you be aware of that self-like part that you thought was a self? And what's that like now? So just kind of keep dancing, with
Like
the
it. I like it. One of the things I think this did come from you is that is the idea of, so I've done this with polarizations, like
yes.
where, like, if someone's having, like, say, the part that um I always use food, right? The part that
Okay.
likes kale and the part that says you have to eat kale and the part that wants to eat all the chocolate chip cookie dough. Which,
Yeah.
do you know that you can buy raw cookie dough that's edible now? Like the
No.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Uh-oh.
So I know
A
it's a
part of me,
problem.
a part of me likes that.
Well, check it out. Do you
The
still
other
live
part
in
says, "Don't tell me. I can't believe she just told me that."
I know. Do you still live in New York City? We haven't
Yes.
done the
Yes, that's right.
um yeah, usually I check in where people are from.
Okay.
So in Bryant Park,
Yes.
there is a ice cream cookie dough
Mm.
like vendor. Like you can go buy ice
Right.
cream that's
Uh-huh.
actually just looks like it's a scoop of cookie dough.
Okay. Wow. That's
Sorry.
that becomes goes on my calendar. Right. To-do
Oh
list.
my
Yeah.
gosh, I got so distracted. So okay, so
The
here's
polarization, right?
yeah, polarization. So the part of you that's going to hang up from this call and go right over to Bryant
Yeah.
Park,
Yep.
and then the part of you that's like, no way. So
Yeah.
what I've used before is when people are like we're very focused on
Hmm.
these parts, I'll ask them to sort of I'll do that, like
That's it.
back away from those parts or step back or
Hmm.
imagine even coming behind you
Yeah.
and looking at those parts. And I think I got that from you, this
Yeah.
idea of like, because we're
Yeah.
so into like noticing
Who's
and
aware? Yeah. I think that's one of the best and simplest, similar to the the normal. Are you aware of that part? Can you ask that part to blend? Find two polarized parts, and then real. Are you aware of that part? You aware of that part? Who's aware of both the parts? And
yeah.
and that's where people can pop into self. You may go into a mindful witness, and then you can just okay. So now who's aware of that witness of those two parts that is inherent, is both spacious and pervasive to all the parts, would be the next question. And that way you're going through this steps of consciousness that normally are trippy, but it gives you like a little ladder to do that,
Yes,
because you have
right. So,
these
so the part of
anchors.
you that's like, this is too hoo-ha, like I'm out
Yeah.
of here, right? The
Right.
ladder helps that part not
Yeah. And somehow the
take over.
polarization really helps that too, because you're getting, okay, it's not just me and something else. It's like, oh, this one thinks it's me and this one thinks it's me. Oh, there definitely are parts. Okay. Okay. I get that. Now, which part is right? Okay. Wait a minute. Who's aware of those two parts? Oh, okay. No, that's not that weird. Like, now, where are you
Right.
aware from? Is there a location, a size, or limitation to that part?
Mm,
And that may open up, and then asking the question about what's it like from there to feel self energy, or say interconnection to those first two parts and the mindful witness. Now you can see from that awake field, you can actually be aware of two things at once, which you can't be aware of using attention.
yes,
Just
right.
use your attention from your mind. You can only be aware. You can't multitask. They say you can only be aware of one thing, then another, then another. You can do it quick, but from this field of awareness, from self, you can be aware of your left hand and your right hand. You can be aware of two parts, because you're aware from a field
Yeah.
of awareness,
Yeah, no, that makes so much
right?
sense. That makes
Yeah.
so much sense. Yeah.
And when you say sense, you mean you can experience it, right?
Yes. In this moment, I mean, I can intellectually
Okay.
understand it. And I think the
Okay.
listeners can intellectually
Okay.
understand it.
Or
And
they may be.
I maybe, and I hope that they will practice
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
And certainly listening to, like, slowing down some of the exercises, even what's here now, when there's no problem to solve. If you want to go back um,
Yeah.
in this uh, audio and slow that down, stop it, and try it again, you'll do it at your own pace that way.
Yeah. So, like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually copy that out and make
Okay.
that a separate, it'll be in this episode, but I'll
Mhm.
copy it out and make it a separate episode so people can just listen to that
Okay.
over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So,
Wonderful.
just encourage people to do that because that's one of my favorites. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, is there anything else you want to say? And then I always ask people like where they are in the world, and I've already told everyone
Yeah.
that you're in New York City. But I am curious, like if you look outside your window,
Yeah.
what do you see?
Yeah. So I see, if I look straight out, I see some other brownstones. I'm in New York City on the Upper West Side. Um, and then on one corner of the block river is West End is a Greek Orthodox church, which is a beautiful old church with this clock tower and a lit up um, clock. And then if I look down the other way, I can see Riverside Park. And at this time of year, I can see through the trees and see the river.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Where are you from originally?
From New Jersey. So
Okay.
nearby. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So thank you for saying that. And then, so is there anything else you want to say before I ask my
Um,
last question?
I just, yeah, I mean, I'm a hope merchant for self, like Dick says, he's a hope merchant for healing, and I'm a hope merchant that self can be known. It's learnable, teachable. It's so loving and already inherent, but to find some support and ways uh, to check and know self.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then, then you can be aware from self to parts. Otherwise, you're aware parts from parts. So I really encourage everyone to explore that. And I certainly will start to provide more educational things as I keep learning from you, from everyone, what works and what's helpful. And yeah, so that's the last thing I would say.
That's great. That's great. It's really exciting. And so you have two books now, YouTube
Yeah,
channel. Do you have a website that you want that people can go to find out like what's the latest thing you've got going on?
sure. Yeah, I have, it's www.lochkelly.org, LOCHKELLY.org. And there's audios, videos, some courses. There's probably a course that there's a YouTube on Derek Scott's website where he interviews me about accessing and living from self. That is a good little free summary. But otherwise, my website always has courses and events. I have a 12-week course going on. I'm currently calling all this EMAT, Effortless Mindfulness Awakening Training, because I'm kind of approaching it using IFS style parts work, but also emphasizing that awakening is possible, is the next natural stage of human development. Living from self-leadership is possible. So there'll be like a teacher training coming up, and there's always some ongoing courses.
So, Locke, last question, if you weren't doing what you're doing and you could do anything in the world, what would you do instead?
Wow, that's so hard because I feel so like so grateful for being like given a gift that isn't even me doing it, just like something's coming through me. And so I think I would be like whatever the universe would lead me to do, I would do that. I could do almost anything from this self leadership. It wouldn't be about the thing I'd be doing. It would be about being led by this greater self.
It's beautiful. That's a good answer. All right. Well, thank you. Anything else? That was amazing.
No, that's it. We could go for another hour, but
I know
we will come back another time.
I would love for you to come back. Yeah, I'd love for you to come back. Thanks for hanging out today. If you liked this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you really like this episode, share it with a friend and leave a review. You can follow me on Instagram at IFS Tammy and join our community on Facebook at the One Inside Podcast. Talk to you next time.